We're recording.
3, 2, 1. All right. So good afternoon, good morning, everybody. This is Matt Krukin. We have Grant Cleveland, right? Or Cleveland. I almost called you Cleveland.
Yeah, city with no V.
All right. I actually did call you Cleveland. So, all right, you're Cleveland. All right, I like it. So guys and gals, first of all, happy month of May. We are obviously driving business and very happy to get you 1 hour's worth of training on BigRoad HOS. Just a quick commercial before we go there. We are going forward. We are coming after today. We will be fulfilling orders on BigRoad. So you need to make sure coming out of here, number one, you understand the product. So ask questions until you feel comfortable. You should also have the ability to demo it. If you don't, please let us know. George, myself, Mark, and attendant, please let us know. We want to make sure you're comfortable. At the end of the day, this is really just we're going to be moving forward with with BigRoad mobile app. I just came off a call earlier today where we're migrating a customer from Fleet Complete HOS. They weren't happy, moving them over to BigRoad, and they became very happy. So this is the best for the customers and best for us. And so I encourage you to spend some time, self-learn, make sure you are good and strong, and engage your technical channel managers where needed. So again, going forward, we are moving forward with BigRoad HOS. Now, with that said, we're probably 2 weeks away from getting officially certified by AT&T. I told them, guys, I told AT&T we're not selling Fleet Complete HOS any longer. It's in the best interest of our customers, and we are operating in a little bit of a gray area here, but I am telling you, we have to be pushing BigRoad, okay? We're going to be a little careful with some of the marketing material still, but if we have time, we'll show you some of the material at the end of this call. But this is the best way to move forward for the customers, for us, and obviously for the product. Real quick.
Hey, Matt. Matt,
yeah.
I'm sorry, this is Tim. When you can you specify that we are selling BigRoad? Will that also include yet just a BigRoad application with DashLink for as compared to the full package with our fleet tracker?
Yeah, so I'll go through that right now, Tim. Actually, that's a
okay.
Good point. So and you probably saw a note from Tony. So what we want to be selling right now. So a couple housekeeping items. And Grant, if you want to keep me honest on this, please feel free to do so.
Sure.
Number one, we want to move and make sure you are all talking and you're pivoting away from, hey, here's Fleet Complete HOS, move to BigRoad. This is what's going to be fulfilled. That means we're sending all of our orders for provisioning through BigRoad. We have offers in our sales portal. They are being updated today. So by end of day today, we'll have all of our different flavorings, one of which will actually be a DashLink with DashLink only. Okay.
Hey, Matt?
Yeah.
I've just created a quote today. Those are in there. The only thing I would, because I added the $7 per driver license, the only thing I'll say is they may want to look at updating it so we can include professional installation, because there's no way to alter that to include it on the BigRoad.
Yep. Yep. Good point. And they are. It's still a work in progress. There, we had 3 calls on this morning, and they're updating it. So if by end of day you don't see it, Paulie, just let me know, okay?
Yes, sir.
So
one more thing, and I promise, the last thing. The way it's worded in the portal, the $29 offer says Fleet Tracker and E-Log, when it should just be Fleet Tracker, BigRoad Fleet Tracker, because that may confuse people, because you still have to add the $7 per license per driver separately. That's all.
So I can tell you right now that I'm not digesting it. So if we can talk after that, I want to make sure. I just want to make sure we have a chance to get Grant on here so you all get training. I just want to give you a quick housekeeping. Paulie, those are definitely important. We need them. But if we could just talk right after, that would be best, okay? Is that cool? All right, cool. And feel free to send it over. I will address it. So products, right? So you saw Tony's note. You should have seen Tony's note. Ideally, we are moving forward with the MGS 700. Two housekeeping items. We are right now working on the single sign-on. So that did slip a little bit. So we're looking at early June where customers can log into Fleet Complete and then have access to BigRoad. Okay, so we're waiting on some final dates, but they're moving forward quickly. We are still working on the integration so that the MGS 700 will be the only needed hardware from a Fleet Complete perspective with driver behavior to interface with BigRoad. We are looking at August for that. Okay, so ideally the product you want to sell is our MGS 700 with BigRoad with e-logs. If a customer wants a fully AOBRD compliant solution today and will not wait until the BigRoad product is integrated with the MGS 700, you do need to sell them the Dash Link with the MGS 700. Okay, that costs Fleet Complete more money, so we do want to only go that route when it's necessary. We have an e-logs product that'll be BigRoad and also a Dash Link product as well. Again, going through certification with AT&T, but these are the products that we move forward with in the portal. BigRoad has submitted their paperwork to the FMCSA for certification, and we are expecting here in the short term to get that approved and be on the self-certification website. All right, I don't know if you all knew that, but BigRoad has submitted that, and that's why we're moving forward with their product. So Grant, any big questions before we move forward, before Grant shows his screen and goes over the product and training? Tim Foreman, if you're on, you asked me a question. Do you guys get paid on it? The answer is yes. If you sell Dash Link, it is confirmed as of today. That is 1 point. 1 point is $20. All right. So let's carry on, Grant. I'll hand over to you.
Perfect. Appreciate it, Matt. So just to kind of give everybody a bit of a lay of the land here, what I wanted to do is spend about 10-15 minutes just going through the driver side, not too complex, but understand some of the inputs and what the end users are seeing on their day-to-day. Then we'll jump over to the back end, look at some of the reporting, what back office staff are going to be looking at on a daily basis. And then on the note that Matt mentioned around collateral and some of the marketing materials, I do have some stuff that I think, given some of the recent sales and provisioning that we've seen push through, might help to clarify some confusion that we've run into in the past. Also just kind of better align the two teams in going forward with the same strategy and the same understanding on how to get our customers up and running as soon as possible. And then we'll just open it up to sort of freelance Q&A period. I know there's a lot of people on today's call, so usually I recommend that people just interrupt me when they have a question. In the interest of everybody's schedule and time, what I'm going to ask is let's just hold them till the end. Hopefully I can address most questions as we go through here. I'm sure there'll be more than a couple at the end, but at that point we can just kind of do rapid fire. And if people have to drop off, I am recording this for sort of a sharing of information purposes. So with that being said, let's kind of start off here, and we'll start with the driver side. So before I get rambling here and going into the product without being sure, can everybody see the screen that I'm sharing where I'm logging into the BigRoad app on the right-hand side here?
Yeah, we see it.
Perfect. Okay. So I'm just going to sign out and start off from scratch here as if I would. Beautiful. So you'll notice that when a driver goes to sign in, they are going to use their email and password. The reason here being obviously they can sign in on any device with the BigRoad application loaded on it. The email address does not have to be active. It's used more like a username in this scenario. However, if they want to take advantage of some of the document sharing features and stuff like that later on, at that point it will need to be an active email. So I know for some companies it's an issue, others it's not. You can kind of have your cake and eat it too by accommodating both in that sense. BigRoad will support driving under multiple fleets. So you'll notice I'm set up as in our 2 test environments here for the purpose of demonstrating that support. And then once I select the fleet in question, it's actually going to pull up a list of all the vehicles registered under that company. You'll notice some of them are Dashlink connected, identified by this logo on the right side here. We also have truck 2 that isn't Dashlink connected. The advantage there being if fleets have some drivers that are short haul exempt, if they have some drivers that are operating vehicles that predate 1999, as the exemption says, then they can continue to do so, but their system can basically track and report on the entirety of their fleet, regardless of whether they're engine connected or not. For today, I'm obviously going to select a Dashlink equipped vehicle. And you'll notice that I've actually intentionally not connected my ELD here, the dash link. Once a dash link is connected and set up within a system, you're actually going to assign the unique ID number of that device to the vehicle so that drivers don't ever have to worry about pairing issues or anything like that. As soon as Bluetooth's enabled, which I just did, within about 3 to 5 seconds, you'll usually see that notification go away and you're told you're ready to roll. As far as general layout, I know most people are probably pretty familiar with this, but we've got our hours of service button here. When I select that, it's going to show me the available time associated with each duty cycle or duty status. In fleets where they choose to permit personal conveyance and yard move, personal conveyance obviously being fifth lining, particularly for owner-operators, they'll have that option made available to them. If the fleet hasn't permitted that yet, it's obviously not going to show up. Yard move, kind of a gray area under the FMCSA's regulations thus far. We would expect them to articulate a little more definitively when and where it can and cannot be used. At this point, what it's going to permit the driver to do is operate up to 5 miles. That's 5 miles traveled, as in odometer, not speed, without it counting against their drive time. After 5 miles, it's going to automatically revert them back into drive mode and continue to deplete whatever drive time they have associated with that day. Lastly, you've also got... Oh.
Say, Grant, sorry, Sandro, could I just ask one question for the team because I know it's going to come up? And I'm sorry to do this. I know we're trying to save it, but for the 5 miles, is it 5 miles in total? Like if I drive in a circle for 5 miles, but only, went 50 feet, does that count? Or is it actually 5 miles as a crow flies from the epicenter?
Correct. It is not, it's not like a radius as you're referring to. That's why I refer to it as 5 miles on your odometer that you can travel.
Thank you.
And then you've got your duty status with a note here. So if you found yourself in adverse conditions and you're having to drive overtime or something to that effect, that's where a driver can, annotate it and provide a little more insight. On the bottom here, we've got a few apps for quick launch. We can incorporate new ones in addition to what we have preloaded in there. There is a bit of a vetting process though, which I know is a question that a lot of people ask. So as soon as we kind of start communications with that company, that's when we'll determine what the efficacy of getting them in there and the rationale behind it. But for the most part, it's usually just your generic apps for, calculating tax and that sort of thing. Got a Google Maps rendering on the bottom of the page here. In the coming months, we're looking to make that an optional feature. Right now it is standard. And the reason for that being, if companies aren't using it, it tends to be a bit of a data usage feature. With that being said, the app, even if you're running it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 31 days in a month, usually chews up about 350 megabytes as far as consumption is concerned. So really not a huge drain when customers are looking at what they have to provide for their drivers or what they are providing and what this might use up. Now to show some of the automation associated with the system, when I put some speed into my emulator on the left side here, you'll notice it immediately brings a notification up. Because I have personal conveyance as an option for me and I was off duty at the time, it'll ask me whether I'm driving for work reasons or personal. If personal conveyance isn't available to me, obviously it's just going to default to putting me in drive mode. Now you'll notice I've actually run out of my time here and I've done that intentionally. But it'll immediately change me over to this directional arrow, as does it change my duty status. If I take the speed out of my emulator, I'm now back to that circle indicating I'm not moving. It won't change my status immediately. I can now go in and click on it and change the status, which it wouldn't have allowed me to do while I was in motion. But if I don't actually do anything with it and I leave myself in drive mode here, it'll actually wait 5 minutes. And if I still haven't moved at that point, it'll then switch me back into on duty, not driving. And it'll retroactively adjust for those 5 minutes so that I'm not shorted on my time for today. So let's jump into logs here. So the first thing a driver is going to see when they log in is kind of a recap on what their day is like and where they're at in their cycle. Now you'll notice that I left myself on duty since a demonstration I did yesterday. So I've got red lines on my logs here. It's also going to tell me when I've got validation warnings that I need to address. as a driver, if I actually click on that piece right there, it's going to take me to exactly where the violation is so I can correct it. I'm going to hold off for now just so we can see how some of these translate over into the back end first, and then we'll go through correcting them. But I've also got two options here, inspect and edit. So when I go into edit, this is how I can add events, annotations, anything like that to my day today. So if I look at my log, it shows me off duty, then driving. Obviously, it's got all the events that have happened since we started today's demonstration. If I wanted to go back and say, you know what, I didn't in fact start my day at 1:19. I actually started it at 1 o'clock. I should have been on duty, not driving, but I was fueling up. Here's where I can leave a note of that. And if I'm even, a driver with some foresight and knows what the back office is going to be looking for, I can include a note here saying I'll share the receipt with them as well. You'll notice that now adjusts back into my log. So my log now starts at 1 o'clock today as far as changes in event status. I'll be able to edit and annotate any events on my log with the exception of drive time. I cannot edit drive time per the ELD mandate. If drive time does need to be edited at some point, somebody from the back office staff, either a safety manager or an administrator, can make those changes. But as the driver, I'll then have to sign off on whatever changes they've made and validate that the new log is accurate and in keeping with the day's actual events.
Hey Grant, this is Maggie. Quick question. You said they could share a receipt. Can you add it as a photo or attachment, or are you just going to be bringing it to the office later?
Yes, you can share it as an attachment. Once I jump into the messaging piece, I'll show how that can be done. Perfect. The other thing that drivers are often going to do, other than annotating their logs or maybe adding an event here and there, is their pre-trip and their post-trip inspections. So I'm going to hit new inspection here. It'll pull up a list of the vehicles that I've driven most recently, my demo truck, obviously. And then it's going to pull all the information it already has in the system. It knows license, time, odometer, location. So all I really have to identify at this point is whether I found a defect or not. Now, if I do find a defect, I'm required to leave a note. Otherwise, I can just do whatever I choose, per Schedule A or whatever the local regulations call for. I can just kind of annotate it in such a fashion that includes citing those sources. But if I do find a defect, then that's when I'm required to leave a note. So you'll notice here that I can type whatever I want. It's relatively free form, but at the same time, as typical salespeople do, I continue to go to the same example over and over again. So the one I've constantly used is that the taillight's out. And once again, similar to the fuel receipt, I'll leave a note here saying see picture. And once we jump over to the messaging app, I'll show how that can be saved and documented for those in the office. I can do as many inspections as I want during the day. Obviously, pre-trip and post-trip is kind of top of mind for some people, but other people with particular property that they're carrying or whatnot might stipulate, okay, every time the driver leaves sight of the vehicle, I want them to do another inspection to make sure that nothing's been altered or changed on the vehicle, so they can add as many as they want. And then I can even sign my inspection report. The first time a driver goes to sign a log, it'll ask them to just use their finger on the touchscreen to create a signature. They'll be able to edit it going forward, but after which it's first loaded, it'll just basically give them this question saying, can you declare that it's accurate and in accordance with the requirements? When they hit sign, it'll then apply it. Everybody always asks, this is not my signature. This is done on a emulator that won't rotate 90 degrees to make it actually aligned the way it should be. As a driver, I'll be able to go back 14 days plus the current day, obviously because we want to support the Canadian regulations as well. And again, you'll see any day that has violations. I've got exclamation marks at the top. I'm going to have red notes. Oh, you'll notice I just got switched over to on-duty mode. So that 5 minutes of sort of wait time that we talked about has elapsed. And now it's also adjusted my log to reflect that I stopped driving 5 minutes ago and not just now. Now, as much as it's important to know what the drivers are going to see and how they're going to be identified of any validation warnings or possible citations that they could incur, the other thing is how is the law officers or the inspectors going to see things. So when I go into inspection mode, you'll notice that right away I'm surfaced with the option to do the US or the Canadian. given that Fleet Complete and BigRoad are both based out of Canada. Let's go with the Canadian one. And at this point, it's going to give them a couple options as far as how they want to go through the inspection. They can send it via fax or email, print it to a printer if there's one on screen on site. Usually doing it on screen is the easiest, and for demonstration purposes, kind of the quickest to walk through. But you'll notice that as soon as I enter that sort of inspection mode, it actually changes the UI of the application. So right now, the dash link is running as an AOBRD. The reason for that being you are grandfathered until December of 2019. With that being said, the device we ship you now, while it's going to be run as an AOBRD, it is ready to be upgraded to ELD compliance. It's basically going to be a toggle that they switch on the back end saying, okay, I want to go into this new mode. For most customers, it's probably not that advantageous. If you look at the same log in an AOBRD mode versus an ELD mode, even over the course of a 1 hour demonstration, it's like 6 times as long in ELD mode because it does a lot more periodic spot checks. It provides way more insight into each individual event, when and where it happened and why, which is why we advise our customers to stick with AOBRD as long as they're ready. But with that being said, have the assurance and the peace of mind that with BigRoad and the Fleet Complete solution, you'll basically be able to flick that switch when you're good and ready and enter that new sort of era of ELD compliance. Now, when I go into my logs in the inspection mode, once again, it'll give the officer a bit of a rundown on how to use the application. But like I said, it's a totally different UI at this point. It's a nice, clean, white screen. And you'll notice that no violation is ever advertised to the officer. When we went into drive mode, even for that 1 minute, I wasn't actually available to go into drive mode. So it had a red tick. That's going to be green on the inspection mode. If I don't have a location, it's not going to surface an empty field. It's just going to not include the location, obviously, because it doesn't have one to tag. I've seen extreme examples where a log is 24 hours across the board of drive time. Obviously, that's a big, red line on the driver's page. But in inspection mode, we really leave it up to the officer to identify missing information, any omissions, any errors, and then they will write a citation for that. But we're not even going to surface fields that haven't been, properly informed or had the appropriate information contained within that log. So I've got no signature for my log yesterday. It doesn't even surface a signature field for me, versus if I go back to a day where I did do a demo and did sign my log, you'll notice that it does say, okay, Grant certified his log is correct. Now, if I had chosen the US option, I wouldn't be able to go back any further than 7 days plus the current day, even though the driver could go back 14. In the Canadian inspection mode, I'll be able to go that far back, but again, no further. So it's basically going to stop me at the 27th here. As the officer, if I try to exit out of the inspection mode, it'll actually prompt them to return the device to the driver if they're done the inspection process, at which point they can get back on the road. The last piece of the driver side that I want to touch upon here really quickly is the messaging piece. So there's kind of 3 components to this. Firstly, you've got your direct, standard instant messaging. It'll actually include delivery and read receipts regardless. It's not like iMessage where people can choose to opt in or opt out of read receipts. The other option that fleets will have is whether they want to permit driver-to-driver communication. Some find it helpful, especially in short-haul operations. Others really don't want to permit it and they want to restrict it to just that of dispatchers and safety managers with those out in the field. Again, it's a matter of corporate preference, but I'll show you on the back end where they can change that setting as well. The second piece of messaging is our check-in feature. Truthfully, every company either finds a lot of value in this or very little. Basically, what it's going to provide is a time and geostamp as to where the operator of that device and that asset is at the time, and let them include any note that they want. So I'm sure everybody here has heard numerous companies complain that, the drive time isn't really what pigeonholes me. It's how much on-duty time I have available to me in a day. If I go to 2 or 3 agents and they take, an hour or 2 hours to turn around a shipment or a load, it really hinders my ability to get through the day. Even though I have drive time available, I might not have enough on duty. This is an example where they can, as drivers and as organizations, notify their shippers and receivers, hey, look, this turnaround time really isn't conducive to what we're trying to accomplish on your behalf. We all know the perils of the drivers and how a lot of risk has been displaced onto them. And so this is kind of a nice validation point for them to say, look, I arrived on location before 1:30 today, and it took me till 3 o'clock to leave. It's geo-stamped. It's, a live Google rendering. It's really a nice way to just kind of document some of those issues and some of those problems. We've actually had very positive feedback from several ports and several agents trying to get their customers kind of more on board. Again, like I said, some companies just don't find it all that useful, but worth touching upon for the scenarios where it is. And then the last piece we have here is the document sharing. So as we commented before, we left a note saying that we fueled up in KW. So I'm going to leave a note here saying that it was $300 Canadian. Now, if I wasn't using an emulator on my computer, but an actual tablet or phone, I could obviously use the camera. For demo purposes, I just have a few preloaded images in here. So let's say this is a picture of my fuel receipt. The default is to send it to dispatch, which is basically going to save it in the sort of the web portal, if you will. But I've also got this add email, which is kind of like a CC. So if this is a fuel receipt, I might want to send it to accounting at BigRoad.com, or John Doe, who I know works in the accounting department. Kind of just keep the necessary parties aware of what's going on out in the field. And in some cases, I've even heard scenarios where drivers documenting that while they're out in the field, whether it be a fuel receipt or the other example that we did where it's a taillight out, giving the back office staff that earlier heads up means that the mechanic can order that piece in that they need ahead of schedule. Or the accounting team can actually turn around a reimbursement check or something to that effect so that when the driver gets back to the location, they have it ready for them right then and there. We, since day one, have done our best to build the most flexible solution that we can. And the idea being, if companies, as they kind of take that next step into e-logging and ELD, want to incorporate new policies, or they want to take existing policies that needed a bit of tweaking in the paper world, but can be much more easily adopted in the e-logs. Obviously, anything we can do to make that transition a little more seamless and a little more efficient for them is going to be a huge value add as far as time savings and whatnot.
Hey, Grant, it's Sandro here. Do you mind if I just add a quick point to the team?
Absolutely.
Hey, guys. So just to be clear, for the DVIR, when you saw Grant do it and he put in an error, you saw it pop up a couple of options. BigRoads does not support a pre-cam messages, but what it does support, and Grant, correct me if I'm wrong here, is your previous messages. So if you continually do the same messages, filling up fuel, arriving, it will actually say, do you want to use those again? So it's not something supplied by the company. It remembers your preferences, correct?
Correct, absolutely. So if I'm an Ontario driver and I say as per Schedule 1 or as per Schedule A, I'm good to go, then it'll have that message saved in the system so I can pull that one up at any time. Absolutely.
And that's based on your user per drive-in. So if you use certain notes and somebody else uses other notes, it's not something supplied by the company. So I just want to point out because, in the FCHOS, our DVIR has a checklist. This doesn't. But as you see, guys, it does allow you to customize your messages for what's wrong, which is all that's required for compliance. We spoiled everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Isn't it nice that we have both kind of spearheads in each hand at this point?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So with that being said, let's switch gears a little bit here and jump over to the back end. So the first page we've got here, everybody should be able to see. Let me just confirm because I'm kind of switching apps. It gets a little funny on GoTo. That you can see the map layout of the US where our drivers are. You guys can see.
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
So keep in mind that as we go through each of the tabs here, again, this is just, a simple kind of web-based login using your email address and password. As we go through each of the tabs of the portal, everything can be filtered down by groups. Once we get to the fleet tab, I'll show how groups can be created and what sort of limitations there are and aren't around that. For now, I'm just going to set it to the company wide. But know that it can be filtered down if you've got terminals or separate locations or something like that people want to organize things by. So geographically, we've got all our drivers represented here. And you can see in areas of high concentration, they'll be amalgamated into kind of that orange button, but I can break it down. Or if I continue zooming in, it'll slowly filter out the drivers that were grouped together. Now, if I can zoom in, hopefully I can find a few different statuses. Perfect. So gray is somebody who's off duty. So Dan right here is up in St. Jacobs, but off duty. Mike Davies, our VP of product, he's on duty, but not driving, hence why it shows that he was stopped at 12:33. Meanwhile, Colin, who is currently on duty and driving, is identified in green. If I hover over his name, it'll show me what speed he's traveling. So at this instance, he might be at a red light. He might be in that kind of 5-minute limbo period between when he shows up at a location and when it automatically switches him back. The speeding information, while it will be visible at any time, it's not going to be tracked. So should somebody ever have their record subpoenaed or something like that, there's no documentation citing Colin was speeding on 12 different events or periods throughout the day when that accident happened. It's really only in the moment that you're going to see that sort of information. The second way we've got everything organized on the driver tab here is by operator. So if we zero in on me here, here's Grant, currently driving his demo vehicle, less than a minute ago in Waterloo, and you can see the availability times. This is great from a dispatching perspective. Hey, I've got somebody that I need to get down to Buffalo ASAP for a shipment. Well, obviously Grant's not the person I should be sending given his availability, but maybe I can send JK. He's got about 10 hours available today. If I want to kind of narrow in on Grant and look at his information a little more here, I click on his name. It'll take me to his log for today. Obviously, I'm notified of any violations that he's committed. I can go back to any day in question since BigRoad was incepted. So if we implemented this in January, I could jump to January 17th and look at what he did on that day. Similarly, I'm going to have my trip sheet. So today is really just using the emulator. So I went due north here. But you'll notice that, again, I can jump to any day in question. All of the events throughout the day, so going into drive mode off duty, have been carried through. Grant actually shared some documents with us while he was on duty, not driving this afternoon. So this is where I can pull up that picture of, okay, this is a fuel receipt, $300 Canadian. Save it as a PDF, print it. Again, it'll be permanently housed in the system. I don't have to worry about, recalling it at any point. And then I've also got Grant's DVIR for today. So here he attested that there was a taillight out. He even sent the picture. And again, that's denoted in my trip sheet with documentation supporting it. As far as audits are concerned, if customers are ever asked to provide 6 months plus the current month, all I'm going to do is hit print. I want Grant's logs and DVIRs. If we're in May here, I'm going to set this to November of 2016. Hit print, and it's basically going to spit out consecutive logs for me, including his signature, his DVIRs, the whole thing. The next tab we've got here, I won't spend a ton of time on this. The reason I say that is the trucks tab is really all the same information as that of the drivers tab. However, as we all know, some companies are just programmed to think driver first, others think truck first. So you'll notice that we have a few more trucks than drivers, obviously, but that the layout is somewhat reminiscent to that of our drivers. Again, I can click in on high concentration areas. If I zoom in, it'll continue to filter out and it'll show me the statuses. So if Colin's still in drive mode, then his truck will be lit up in green. Here's somebody driving a truck right now. Again, just to show you how kind of parallel the information is, if I find Grant's demo truck, currently being driven by Grant, same location, same status, same availability times, and even clicking on the vehicle in question is going to pull up that same trip sheet. So whether you're a mechanic who's kind of just focused on the asset versus a dispatcher who might be focused on somebody's availability, one might find one tab more useful than the others, but it's just nice to have it organized both ways for whichever sort of hierarchy or organizational structure they follow. Now, what BigRoad's really aimed at helping people with is compliance and hours of service. So when I jump over to the dashboard tab here, again, I kind of get two layouts. Firstly, that of my fleet as a whole. So you can identify how many users are at risk versus how many logs across your user base are at risk. I find this interesting sometimes. I think it's worth understanding whether I have a lot of drivers making a few number of errors or a few number of drivers making a lot of errors. Obviously, the significance and the type of error is also going to be important, because driving overtime versus a small form and manner issue or a missing signature is going to be way more impactful on my operation should I get a citation for driving overtime, and how that's going to affect insurance premiums. So I've got all of my bad drivers pushed to the top of the list here. You'll see obviously a lot of red. Testing environment would never want to see this much red in one of our customers' pages. But if I scroll down to the bottom, the drivers that really don't require my attention because they have a clean record are pushed out of my sort of focus, if you will, so that I can just address those that need to correct a few issues here. So let's pick on myself. Click on Grant here. Because I believe I'm currently set up in the Canadian rule sets, it's showing me 14 days plus the current. So you can see that I've got no violations on my logs until yesterday. Yesterday's log has to be signed and submitted, as well as I drove overtime today. So from a back office perspective, I could message Grant saying, hey, need you to sign for the 10th. Grant on his driver side program here is going to get a message saying you need to address the 10th. Now, again, there's a few ways I can go about correcting this. I can go into edit logs and scroll back to the 10th. Alternatively, and what I suggest for most customers, because it helps them educate their drivers, is if they click on the validation warning in that recap page, it'll take them to each one specifically. So, okay, yes, the 10th is the first violation I have. I can tell it's just missing a signature. I need to apply that now. Sign. And within usually 2 to 3 seconds, you'll see that corrected on the back end. Now, when Grant goes back and looks at the validation warnings, okay, there's only one now, and you can see that it's for today. Now, my violations for today are because I've driven overtime. Again, as a driver, I can't adjust that. So at that point, a safety manager would have to go in, and they would go into their driver page, find Grant. And because I'm set up as kind of every role available in the system, I can do this. I could go in and edit Grant's log. I could change a few events, all that sort of stuff. Moving on to our reports tabs here. So obviously, if the reports are pretty important, especially considering the tax implications. So you'll notice that I can run a report for individual trucks, sort of a subset of my fleet, or the fleet as a whole. So say I wanted to look at the month of April, what does my mileage look like? This can be run in miles or kilometers, depending on whether it's a Canadian or an American company and how they file. Depending on the number of entries I've selected and the date range in question, it'll usually take between 5 and 20 seconds to build that report. But you'll notice that any report I've ever run is permanently saved in the system and can be recalled at any time. Now that my report's ready, hit that. Kind of gives me a breakdown by state here. Obviously, it's got a few provinces included with Alberta and BC. Scroll down a little further. There it breaks everything down by asset. So I can see, okay, here's Alex's truck. Here's the breakdown of mileage per state. And all of this is exportable to Excel. Just hit a button and it'll open it up for me in a format that's a little easier to play with. The other report that we have in here that's a little less operations focused and a little more driver performance or kind of driver tracking oriented is our hours and mileage report. Now, given that we're not a proper trucking company, we get some pretty wonky information in here. Again, I can do it for a subset of my fleet or everybody. I know some trucking companies out there reward drivers for having the most mileage in any given month. Some of them, I even have some customers that cite they use this report for like hourly tracking and wage for payroll purposes. Obviously, you kind of run into the possibility of some driver error that could sway things one way or the other. But what I always find most interesting is looking at, okay, how many days have they worked in that time span? How much time is spent in each status and what's their mileage? Like I said, you can get some pretty interesting information here. So, okay, Brock drove for 4 days and did 181 miles. Meanwhile, Aaron worked for 5 days and 1,400. maybe there's a rational reason behind that. But for a proper organization, you can get some pretty insightful information pulled out of this when you look at it on a kind of monthly or recurring basis. And then the final tab we've got here is our fleet tab. This is where a lot of those kind of presets, permissions, and configurations that we've discussed are controlled on the fleet level. So if I go into edit here, this is where I can input all of my carrier information, my USDOT details, all that sort of stuff. I can assign a duty cycle to my fleet as a whole. With that being said, obviously everything can be customized to the individual as well. So if you have half your organization running under one rule set and then a couple people that kind of fall into other buckets, they can be configured that way, absolutely. We've got property versus passenger carrying vehicle types. So great support for like busing and coach companies as well. Several of the most popular exemptions here. So we've got the 100 air mile radius, 16-hour big day, Texas interstate. Obviously, we're looking to incorporate more and more of these as they get passed. I think it was just yesterday I heard another state is basically stipulating that ELD will be required even on an intrastate level. So obviously we're keeping our finger on the pulse around those sort of details. And then some of the fleet-wide settings that we touched upon earlier, you can see this is where that information is kind of identified, or those permissions are removed or added for drivers. So driver-to-driver communication, whether you want to permit that or just restrict it to back office and drivers. We talked about yard move and that 5 mile leniency. That's where you can permit it or not. Personal conveyance, if I have a purely OO fleet, I'm probably going to have that set up right away. But if I have a subset of my drivers are company versus that of OO, and I need to kind of coordinate things on a driver basis, I can do that as well. Now the data retention piece, you'll notice it defaults to forever. You can set it to purge the system every so often. With that being said, I harp on it every time I speak to a customer. Don't ever set it for less than 225 days. You could be asked for 6 months plus the current month. The last thing you want to do is not be able to provide that information. But obviously, it's the company that controls that sort of setting when they get provisioned and initially onboarded into the program. Users. So you'll notice here that everybody who's set up in the system is identified by name, email, and role. One question that I know has come up before, and one thing that I wanted to really touch on today, we are a licensing model. And so any user, regardless of what their responsibility is going to require a license. So if we're talking to a 10 driver fleet, usually it's a 12 license agreement that they need to get set up with, because they're going to have one or two people in the back office that also oversee the fleet. You'll notice when I go to invite a user, and I'll just make up an email here, I have the option to identify what roles I want to set that user up as. But again, it's going to use a license regardless of whether I give them one role, all four, and it doesn't matter if I do give them one role, which it is. Every single user in the system is going to need a unique license. Another question we often get, can all of my dispatchers or my safety managers or people in the back office share one login? No. Under the new regulations of the ELD mandate, whenever people change things, so for example, if I went back and edited one of my drivers' drive time on a day, it'll actually be identified by name as to who changed that, as it needs to be under the requirements. So every unique user is going to need a license, whether they're on the road or in the back office. As important as it is to understand setting users up, you're also going to have a list of removed users. So if we have somebody who left the organization relatively recently, so here's Andre, left about 3 months ago. If I did find myself in an audit and I needed to provide those 6-month historicals, it's actually going to pull Andre's information because it knows the date that he was removed. And obviously he falls into that sort of 6-month window to some extent. When we first started the demo, we talked a little bit about setting trucks up and pairing them with a unique DashLink ID so that there was no connectivity issues around drivers syncing with the right system. So when I add a vehicle, it's going to ask me for the number, license plate, VIN, and then here I'm going to say, okay, it is in fact engine connected. It's got an ELD unit, and here's where I'll put that ID in. So if I have 100 drivers go out to the yard at the same time, they all turn the keys and try to connect to the truck that they got into. Each system is going to know which unique dash link it's looking for, so that you don't get any crosstalk or any funny connectivity issues in that sense. We talked about the ability to set up groups within the system. So you'll see here that these are all the groups that I've created. I can add a new one at any time. And what's really nice too is users can be a part of multiple groups. So if this is the BigRoad fleet, Brock Tanner is a member of that group. But if I go to sales, Brock Tanner is also a member of that sales group. So they can be kind of grouped in under several different teams, terminals, whatever the configuration of that customer may necessitate. The billing piece here, obviously this is our test environment, so we don't have any invoice history or anything like that, but this is where customers are going to be able to see the number of licenses they have in their account, how many licenses have been assigned to a customer. We're also going to have any information around what they pay per license, per dash link, all that sort of stuff. I know at this point there's still some kind of murkiness and going back and forth around, okay, is this being set up on the Fleet Complete side or whatnot? For the time being, we're setting everything up as kind of a manual process on our end, just to make sure that no automation triggers any invoices or funny financial business. But this is where the customers will be able to go and see sort of what they're paying on a monthly basis, the frequency in which they pay, all of that sort of stuff. And then lastly, we've got the apps piece here. So you'll notice that there's a couple companies that we've worked with in the past. Truthfully, it's not all that common that these two are kind of enabled right away by a customer. What's most important to them 99 times out of 100 is that they have their own unique API key. And so if they are already working with a TMS or some sort of dispatching solution and they want their availability and hours of service details pulled into that system so that they can use the most accurate and up-to-date times for their drivers for dispatching, that can absolutely be provided. They can also replace the API key if they make a switch or they want to terminate a connectivity. Truthfully, this isn't my area of expertise. So if anybody has any specifics around API questions or its capabilities, feel free to shoot me an email or follow up with somebody at BigRoad here. Myself and Marsha are probably your two best contacts. And we can loop in the appropriate parties, whether it be our product team, development engineers, anything like that. Now, usually when I do a demo at this point, this is where I'd kind of turn it back to the customer and ask any questions that they have. With that being said, just from having been involved in some of the back and forths and the conversations that we've had over the last couple weeks, a couple things that I did just kind of want to highlight. So here's the one pager that we have around our dash link. If I scroll down here, you'll see this is the actual ELD box itself. The box in question is identical regardless of what sort of ECM port or connectivity issue you have. Once we ascertain what cables they have, whether it be because they provide their asset list or they give us year, make, and model, that sort of stuff, that's when we'll go to our order form here and we'll look at what sort of pin configurations we're sending to them. So if they order 10 dash links, they get 10 of those boxes, but they might need 6 9-pin and 4 6-pin to kind of facilitate the connections that they require. All of this is available on our website. So if anyone has questions around how does BigRoad, put those orders through, or how do I help my customer identify what it is that they're going to need, this is a great resource and certainly something that can help kind of give people a bit of a visual aid. The other thing that I know we've run into in the past, like I mentioned, is the number of users. So if somebody's talking about a 10 driver fleet, bear in mind they're probably going to need a couple additional licenses to cover those in the back office. And with that being said, if anyone has any sales cycles or deals that are close to the finish line and they want to include somebody from BigRoad just to make sure that the transfer of information is succinct and that everybody's on the same page, nothing gets dropped off. I think everybody has my contact information, but I'm happy to send out my email or my phone number to everyone. Please feel free to reach out at any time. We've got a great team here that's happy to help. We just need to be kind of included on those conversations to make sure that there's no balls dropped as orders and provisioning and those sort of processes get kickstarted. So with that being said, Matt, why don't I turn it back to you and see if there's any follow-up questions or anything we need to circle back on at this point.
Yeah, so awesome. Appreciate it. Hopefully your hard drive hasn't filled up with the recording here.
It looks like
thank you. You still have room? I'm sorry. It looks like full or not full?
it looks like it's still recording, so that's a good sign.
All right. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. All right. So guys, so we have 5 minutes left. What questions do you have? I think actually that was great. What do you guys have? Do you have questions? And Sandra, I know you had a couple comments. Let's just see what kind of questions they have up front here.
Hey, this is Nick. There are two questions. Oh, sorry, I can hear myself. It's odd. Okay, so there's two questions I have. One would be, how does the Dashlink account for unaccounted for drive time? And also, can you show how an administrator can edit someone else's log? I have not been able to get either of those features to work in my demo.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sorry, you did kind of break up during the first piece, so we'll have to circle back to the Dashlink. But as far as editing somebody's drive time, so the first thing to keep in mind is a safety manager or somebody in the back office can only edit the drive time of somebody who's engine connected. So if somebody's just doing the e-logs, they have the same kind of leniency or leeway as somebody would on paper. So a driver can go back and edit that. But with that being said, if I go to Alex Siegmiller here, who you can see is at Dashlink connected because of this logo, if I go to his log, and hopefully I can find one from the last day or two. Here we go. So he's doing this log. Oh, he hasn't signed it yet. Of course, that's the case. Here we go. So Alex was driving his big rig on, what is this, the 9th. You can see that he signed his log saying it's done. I'm complete with this log. And then I look at it and I go, no, Alex, you haven't in fact actually entered some locations here, or you haven't, logged it as accurately as you could have. That's when I'm going to have this editability. I can go in, I can edit this drive mode, say, okay, you were in fact driving for 9 minutes, not 1 minute, and your location was Waterloo, Ontario, at which point I'll hit save, confirm the changes in the driver's logs. The description of my changes is driver lost cell connection and forgot to adjust when re-entering. Obviously, this is just an example I'm pulling off the top of my head. And then when I hit confirm, you'll notice that that log has been adjusted to reflect 9 minutes instead of 1 minute. Now, an important distinction to make here is this is how the system works now, per the mandate and the rules. Once December rolls around, and we'll probably incorporate it before December so that no adjustments are made, when people are already being held accountable to the new ELD specs, Alex will then have to re-sign his log on this day because I've altered it. Again, that's something that we'll probably incorporate Q3, early Q4, just to make sure that people's adjustments are prior to the mandate. And sorry, there was another question around the Dashlink tracking unaccounted. Was it mileage or hours?
Yeah, so under the mandate, if the vehicle is moving and no one is logged in, you have to assign those miles to someone. How does that happen in BigRoad?
So right now it's going to basically be flagged as like an exception when you run like your state-by-state mileage, and it'll say, hey, you've got missing mileage here. I need you to basically like appropriate it or adjust it on the back end, which is how a safety manager would do it. But with that being said, we're actually beta testing what we're calling our unassigned mileage claim right now. I understand it's supposed to be kind of released in the coming 4 to 6 weeks timeframe. And similar to the way that personal conveyance message came up to me saying, are you driving for work reasons or personal? It'll surface a message saying, hey, we actually noticed that the last person who was logged into this truck and driving it finished their day at 1,000 miles. But now the odometer is reading 1,050. So somebody drove for 50 miles without it being unaccounted for. Was it you? And it'll basically serve a yes, that was me, or no, it wasn't. And you'll basically see a trail as drivers say no, 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 no. And once it's claimed, you'll get notified of it. Otherwise, you'll see enough pings as it continues to go down the fleet to say, okay, maybe this was a mechanic's use. Maybe this was somebody on personal conveyance and not logged in, something like that. And then you can reassign it. But we will be putting that in the hands of the driver in the coming month or 2 months.
Okay, thanks.
Hey,
Hey, Grant, Bob from Detroit. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for joining us.
I got a very quick question. Training fee. Is there a training fee around this? And how much is it going to cost the customer for us to house this information?
So training is included on setup. We've got a dedicated team of trainers that help with like onboarding, provisioning. Depending on the size of the customer, obviously there's a few differences there. So if it's a pretty massive account, we'll even send somebody down at times to do on-site training. With that being said, our most common sort of forum is through webinars and a go-to-meeting similar to this, where we'll walk them through adding maybe those first couple drivers, maybe adding a log or two from the last week so that you start seeing some information carry through and run a sample report or two. The other thing we've got is our YouTube channel, which is a great resource. We've got like full hour-long demos as well as short videos that are like a 30-second install video, maybe a 2.5-minute video on what a driver does when they're going through their first inspection mode roadside. All great resources, and if you need anything from us, feel free to reach out. But my kind of mantra and what I have my team kind of advocate here is we're software as a service. With that being said, the service is the most important part. And that's why training and onboarding and getting the customers up and running, post-sales is always crucial to any sales cycle. And we stress that by including that there's no additional fee whatsoever.
I'll chime in there, Dave, where our training staff is being, our normal Fleet Complete training staff is being trained up on BigRoad as well. So they'll be able to help with our normal training parameters.
I have a question about something that wasn't covered. I've been playing with the app this fall back in DC. I understand that it's pulling from the ECM and it's updating the actual odometer. When the truck stops, is it going to auto-populate the end odometer, or is that manually put in?
No, it will pull the end odometer, absolutely.
Thank you.
The only time odometer readings will have to be manually entered is when a user is just using the software. Obviously, at that point, it's not engine connected, so they're going to have to enter those details. And the reason we take as much onus out of their hands in that scenario as well is that we've all seen examples where somebody puts in like 10,000 instead of 1,000. Obviously, that 9,000 mileage has a big impact on IFTA reports and taxes. So in every scenario where we can, we're going to automate that. But when we're not engine connected, obviously we're reliant on the driver to put it in there.
Yeah, so here, let me just, well, hold on, Grant, real quick, Sandra, just to make one comment. So our current solution that we want to be selling and leading with is the MGS 700 with BigRoad software, ideally e-logs, right? So that's not going to be integrated until with the MGS 700 until, let's say, August. So that would be manual right now, unless a customer wants it immediately, and then that's when we would ship them the DashLink product with the MGS 700. Does that make sense, Paul and team?
Yes, sir.
Quick question on that one, Matt, because here, I mean, as Grant was saying, everybody needs a license, even the dispatcher in the background. Do we take that under account when we're adding, that $7 add-on for electronic logbooks? Are we going to have to add one for each user that's going to be needing electronic logbook access?
I'm gonna say yes, I believe so, but I'm gonna let Sandro and Nick confirm that.
That's actually a question I was going to ask, Matt. Right now, the rate that we're charging, I'm not sure if that allows them to access the BigRoad website as well, because that's kind of a building between BigRoad and us. Did we take that into account?
Right, because in Fleet Complete, it's basically the driver that we're charging, but not the people on the back end.
Well, technically in Fleet Complete, we're charging HOS per MGS 700 device, not even how many licenses or how many drivers they're creating in there.
Yeah, that's right.
So we'll have to take that offline and figure out how we're going to be doing that between BigRoad and Fleet Complete. So hang tight on that one.
Yeah, and plus if they're ordering 100 drivers, but they have 10 support staff, they might have to get extra licenses. So yeah, we'll have to figure that one out. And team, I just want to point out one thing here. Remember, for the BigRoad solution, to be AOBRD compliant, you need the DashLink. Or as Matt said, if you use the 700 just with the software, it only counts as an e-log. So to be AOBRD compliant, because people are going to ask you about that, they need the DashLink product, so that we'll actually run it in parallel with the MGS 700.
Yeah, and if you guys are uncomfortable with that, don't be shy, right? Because it's a pivotal point here. You know, guys, this is not easy, right? We're going through a transition here. We're transitioning to a better product, and obviously there's some transition and change over the next couple months. So don't be shy. Ask questions if you need it.
Yeah, I have a question, Grant. So I've installed the application.
You can't ask questions, Alberto.
I've installed the application here, so I'm on the BigRoad app, and I see that you guys do support some other applications to have right on there as add-ons like DriveWise or MyDAT. Do you suggest any of these applications, when you're doing the demonstration? Because I see a ton here. I personally haven't heard of some of these applications, but do you suggest any of these?
Truthfully, I don't really feature them. The reason I ask that is as soon as you show them an app that's even remotely similar to something else they're using, they immediately bring up wanting to incorporate another one. And as soon as you get into custom integrations and stuff like that, slows things down. There's more objections to handle and everything. We're also, you can't just put any app in. It's not like they can drag and drop them themselves. We actually have to reach out to the customer or the vendor and kind of go through a vetting process. So truthfully, I don't highlight them. If people say this is a deal breaker, we'll certainly set up a call and go down that route and see what's available to us. But I don't find it a big selling feature, or B, particularly helpful in expediting any sales cycles.
Okay, good to know. And do you guys have group chat messaging? Or is it just one-on-one?
Yes, you can send a message to multiple people. So you can.
Grant, you said that could be restricted, right? They can restrict whether or not they want their drivers to be able to chat with each other?
Correct. So you could restrict driver-to-driver communication, no question. But you could even restrict driver-to-driver communication, and then I could send a message to all my guys in the sales team here and say, I need everybody to update their forecast for the month or whatever, and it'll go to those individuals. But they won't be able to reply to the group because that driver-to-driver communication has been prevented.
Okay.
Hey, Grant. How are you? It's Mitch. You had mentioned IFTA, right? And with the data link, obviously, you can pull the mileage. Is BigRoad compliant with IFTA?
So what we provide is an output that will absolutely help customers with IFTA. But I've gone through this conversation with other people. Usually it's like because they're renting their vehicles from a Ryder or a Penske or something like that. And they're like, all I want is an output that I can just click a button and have it go off. It is not a formal IFTA filing. It is just a state-by-state mileage output that will help with IFTA. We're looking to further develop that and have it more robustly available to our customers by Q3 of this year, I'm told. But at this point, no, it is not an IFTA report. It's a state-by-state mileage report.
Does that answer sound familiar, guys?
Sounds like our answer. All right, thanks.
You can tell we're all pretty well versed.
Hey, this is Rich. Quick question. Do you know, with the apps on the front, can we set up the new AT&T Enhanced Push to Talk as being one of the buttons on there?
I know Sandro personally asked me that question when we first kind of sat down as a team. I know that Mike Davies has been brought aware of it. He's our VP of product, and I think there's an ongoing conversation, but I don't know its status, and I don't know how optimistic it's looking at this point. I can circle back and get an update for you.
Also, guys, keep in mind that once this integrates into Fleet Complete as a single sign-on, they're still going to have access to everything Fleet Complete. This will be a drop-down to open up a tab within the portal, just like they do with HOS now. So, we'll still have integration with Push to Talk from the portal to the device. I understand what you're saying about having the icon there in the shortcut, but we're not losing Push to Talk integration.
This is Melissa Fairbanks. Quick question around the mileage report. I noticed that you don't break it down toll versus non-toll roads, which is pretty beneficial, especially in the state of New York, and I believe Chicago. It's pretty important. are you, or do you have any estimated time if you'd ever incorporate that? Or Sandro and Nick, since our system does that, will that still work for our breakdown?
So from the BigRoad side, I can tell you I don't think that it's immediately on the roadmap. I know we've discussed with some smaller companies workarounds like doing a duty status with an annotated note saying on a toll road, and then using the trip sheets, you can kind of get a Band-Aid fix for that. With that being said, I certainly wouldn't advise it for a larger operation because doing it for 5 or 6 drivers versus doing it for 5 or 600 is going to be a very different project. I wish I could say that, it's right around the corner, but I don't think it's on the roadmap at this point.
So,
Sandra or Nick, do you think?
Mileage, yeah, if we're using the MGS 700, all that mileage data will still go through our distance report, which is also being updated to be a little bit better in terms of the IFTA compliance as well. So that will all roll through our distance report still.
Okay, thank you.
So Matt, I apologize. I do have an interview candidate that's in here, and I'm gonna have to go sit down with them. Can I? I think you have all my contact information. Maybe we can get together on how we can send out this video to the rest of the reps and the TSM and individuals that couldn't join today's call. And then if there's any other follow-up questions, we can take it offline and do it either by email or set up another call later on.
Yeah, sounds perfect. Appreciate your time. Thanks everybody for being on here. This is just one step to get us all closer to being having sales excellence. So thanks, Grant. Thanks, team. Talk to you all soon.
Thanks, everyone.